Welcome to the Homeschool Mom Podcast, where biblical truth informs our everyday lives as homeschool moms. I'm Janelle Knudsen, and you are listening to episode number 2, Homeschooling Multiple Grades. Now, I think what I probably should have titled this episode is Homeschooling Multiple Grades Without Losing Your Mind, because that's what it feels like sometimes, right? It feels like we're losing our minds when we're trying to juggle teaching multiple kids, but we don't want that to happen. So this is the first episode in a 2-part series about homeschooling multiple grades. Today, we're going to look at some tips to save your sanity while homeschooling multiple grades. And then in the second episode, we'll focus on methods for managing multiple grades. So that's where we're going to get really practical and look at practical ways to teach more than one child. Before we jump into this episode, I want to let you know that the show notes for this episode can be found at janelleknudsen.com/podcast. All right, let's look at 5 sanity-saving tips for homeschooling multiple grades. These are general ideas to help you tackle this big task of homeschooling several kids at one time. The first tip is to establish your priorities. Homeschooling more than one child can be a daunting task, right? So taking some time to establish your priorities will help you better focus your time and your energy on what's really important. It's so easy for us as moms to get caught up in the day-to-day that we lose sight of our priorities. We get carried away by the immediate chaos and demands of our kids that we feel like we're chasing after our day instead of leading our day with wisdom and intention. Can you relate? So there are 3 areas that I actually like to sit down and prioritize. Number 1 is my life. Number 2 is my home, and number 3 is my homeschool. So let's look at prioritizing things in your life first. Your life is probably full of a lot of different relationships and activities, including your relationship with God, your marriage, your kids, your family, your friends, homeschool activities, and other commitments. So I encourage you to write all of these down and think about which ones are top priority in your life right now. If you can only get a couple things done in a day or a week or a month, which ones are most important and which ones can you say no to in this season of life? I want to encourage you to make God and your marriage your top priorities. Don't sacrifice your marriage for homeschooling. Okay, let me just say that again. If you get nothing out of this episode, please do not sacrifice your marriage for homeschooling. You know, I think as moms, and I'm speaking from experience here, it is so easy to get wrapped up and overwhelmed with homeschooling that the only thing we talk to our husbands about is our struggles with homeschooling and with our kids. We want to vent about curriculum that isn't working. We want to persuade our husbands to allow us to have more money to buy curriculum that we are certain will change our lives and make things easier. But are we taking some time to actually invest in our marriages? Are we spending time doing things that strengthen our marriage? Our kids really need a healthy marriage more than they need a great homeschool experience. So please invest and make your marriage a top priority, even over homeschooling. Now, if we want to have success in our homeschool, we also need to make our relationship with God a priority. He must be the center of every area of our life. So I encourage you to put him first. We cannot homeschool apart from him. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it may be that you've left God out of the picture. Homeschooling really is a huge task that we really cannot do on our own. So we need the Lord working in our lives if we're going to homeschool all of our kids successfully. As you prioritize your life, you might discover that you need to sacrifice some activities and commitments, especially if you're already feeling overwhelmed homeschooling multiple grades. So some outside commitments might need to be eliminated if all your kids are really young and they're not able to work independently yet. So teaching little ones requires a greater investment of your time and energy because you have to instruct them in the basics. So know that as your kids get older, they will be able to work more independently and you'll probably have more time for additional activities and outside commitments. But make sure you know what your priorities are for your life, including God and your marriage, family and friends, and other activities and commitments in your life, and just prioritize those out. Now, once you have your priorities for life down, it's time to establish priorities in your home. Now, as homeschool moms, we often want to do everything, right? We want to be perfect in everything. But when it comes to our home, we cannot do it all while also homeschooling multiple grades, especially if a lot of our kids are younger ones. So think about what is most important for you to tackle in any given day, in any given week, in any given month. This might mean that the top priority in your home is just getting dinner on the table, right? Because kids need to be fed. Our family needs to be fed. So that might mean that the laundry doesn't get folded and put away. And you know what? That is okay in this season of homeschooling. I encourage you to sit down with your husband and talk about one or two things that are really important to each of you when it comes to your home. Does he like to have the toys picked up at the end of each day? Do you want to wake up to a clean kitchen each morning? So what tasks in your home really bother each of you if left undone? And then make these your top priorities and schedule them into your day or into your week. So we've established some priorities in our lives and in our homes. Now we want to establish priorities in our homeschool. What do you want to accomplish on a daily basis in your homeschool? What about on a monthly basis? What do you want to accomplish this year in your homeschool? Do you have goals for your homeschool? If not, I did a YouTube video on the importance of setting yearly goals in your homeschool. I'll link to that in the show notes, and I encourage you to go check that out. So think about what is absolutely essential for you to accomplish in your homeschool each day and each week. If you've got little ones in elementary, that's probably going to be reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? Stick to the basics. Start with the essential things, and then if you have extra time, move to the non-essentials. So maybe that means that incorporating history or science into your week happens only if you have that extra time after completing reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, for older kids, it can be a little trickier, right? Because everything seems essential for them, especially in the high school years. So focus on what will help move you forward in meeting long-term goals for your older kids. For example, does your teen plan on attending college? What courses does he need to complete to get into the college of his choice? Is your teen planning on entering the workforce out of high school? What can he be doing now to prepare for that in the future? So establishing priorities and setting goals for your homeschool will help you to stay focused on the most important tasks at hand, and it will make it a lot easier to say no to things that will only make your life a lot busier and a lot more chaotic. It is also a good idea to evaluate your extracurricular activities and outside commitments. Now, I know as homeschool moms, we worry about shortchanging our kids because we're homeschooling them. Are they missing out on something because we're homeschooling them? And so we want to just fill up our time with extracurricular activities and outside commitments. But we really need to think through, are these outside activities helping meet the goals that you have for your family? Or are they just creating more stress? I encourage you again to sit down with your husband and talk about what priorities and goals you have for your homeschool, for your family, for each of your kids. Are there changes that you need to make to better reflect your top priorities? Discuss together, pray together, and make changes as needed. But again, remember, you need to ask yourself the question, are these activities helping you meet the goals that you have for your family, or are they just adding more stress? When it comes to prioritizing and setting goals for your homeschool, having a vision statement for your homeschool can be really helpful. It's kind of like a guide to helping you know what to say yes to and what to say no to. Plus, when all that craziness of homeschooling multiple grades becomes overwhelming, and it probably will, you can go back to your vision statement for encouragement. So the vision statement that I have for our family is this, quote, to raise and educate children who love the Lord with all their hearts and minds, who are equipped to defend their faith, and who are dedicated to using the gifts and talents God has given them to serve and bless others for the glory of God. So just a quick note here, I will include this vision statement in the show notes if you want to go look at it in more detail. But how does this vision statement help? Well, when I feel like I'm falling behind in homeschooling, when I feel like I'm failing my kids and I can't homeschool multiple grades at the same time anymore, when I'm discouraged because some of my kids didn't get their math lesson done or we didn't finish the history lesson on a particular day, I can go back and look at that vision statement to give me a fresh perspective. My priority is right there in my vision statement. It's that my children would love the Lord with all their hearts, that they would be equipped to defend their faith. It's that they'd be developing their gifts and talents for the glory of God. Nowhere in my vision statement does it say, get the math work done every single day. No. See, instead of growing frustrated over what we did not accomplish, I ask myself whether we have made progress in meeting our vision statement. Have I attended to the hearts of my children? Have I equipped them with God's word? Did they have time this week to develop a skill that they'll need later in life as they pursue God's will for their lives? We must get our priorities in the right order if we want to be able to tackle this task of homeschooling multiple grades. All right, that was a lot for just tip number 1. Do you even remember what the tip was? Well, I'll review for you. It was to establish your priorities. And as we looked at establishing priorities, we looked at establishing them in our life, our homes, and our homeschools. Now on to sanity saving tip number 2. That's to have a plan. Have you heard that saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail? Well, I don't know if that's exactly true for homeschooling. I don't think you're going to fail at homeschooling if you neglect to plan. But the lack of planning is certainly going to make it more difficult for you to homeschool multiple grades at the same time. One thing that's really important to plan for when you're homeschooling multiple grades is planning your curriculum. One of my best tips for choosing curriculum is to choose curriculum that you, the mom, can implement into your home. It is often our tendency as moms, right, to choose curriculum that our kids will love. And that's a good thing, but it isn't the most important. Because if your kids love a curriculum, but you never have the time to get to it, then it really doesn't do your kids any good. It's just going to sit on the shelf and collect dust. So you really need to think about whether you can implement a particular curriculum with multiple children. Think about the time that you have. If a math curriculum is going to take 20 minutes and you have 4 kids, and then the history curriculum is going to take 20 minutes with each child, and then you still have science and phonics and spelling and writing, and well, you get the idea, right? Do you even have that amount of time in one day to do all those curriculums with each of your kids? Probably not. We're going to talk about some very specific curriculum options for homeschooling multiple grades in the next podcast episode. So make sure to check that one out when it comes out. But for now, think about whether curriculum is really doable for you and your family. We also want to have a plan for the school year. So think about what you want your school year to look like. Are you going to homeschool year-round or follow a traditional school year calendar? Will each day of the week follow the same routine, or will some days follow a different schedule? As you plan the school year, make sure that you communicate your plans with your kids. This is really important because we want everybody to know what is expected of them. This is going to help reduce the chaos and make it a whole lot easier to homeschool multiple grades. Did you know that you don't have to teach every single subject every single day? I didn't know that at first. But sometimes for us as moms, it's not really the task that is overwhelming, rather remembering all the tasks that we have to do in our head at the same time. That's what's overwhelming, is trying to juggle everything in our brains. So if trying to keep track of 6 subjects for numerous kids each day makes your head hurt, then don't do every single subject every single day. You can assign a subject to one day or 2 days of the week and then tackle just a few subjects in more depth on 1 or 2 days. For example, maybe on Monday and Wednesday, you're going to tackle history. You do a week's worth of history lessons in those 2 days. Maybe you also throw in some English and some math instruction. Then on Tuesday, you do literature plus some math. And on Thursday, you dive into science. Maybe Friday is left for field trips and art. I might be actually missing a few subjects here, but you get the idea, right? You're just tackling a few subjects on 1 or 2 days. This method takes a load off of our overwhelmed mommy brains because we only have to think about a few subjects each day. And honestly, this really works better for some kids as well because they get overwhelmed switching from one subject to the next subject to the next subject. And they really like to dive in and focus on just a few things at a time. And so sometimes this is really beneficial for our kids as well. You also don't have to teach every subject every semester. I learned this method from my oldest when she was taking dual enrollment classes online in her high school years. The school had it set up so a student would take just 1 or 2 intense 8-week classes. After 8 weeks, she would take her final for those 2 classes and move on to a few more subjects for 8 weeks. This works really well for some kids who feel like they are spread thin with numerous courses every single semester. This option really allows them to focus their attention on just a few courses at one time. So again, beneficial maybe for you as a mom, also might be beneficial for your student. You can have your teens do a year's worth of history in one semester, and in the next semester have them focus on science. So just remember, you don't have to do every subject every semester. This is one of the great benefits of homeschooling. Flexibility, making things work for your family. Okay, so you have a plan for your curriculum and for your school year. Now it's time to plan a routine or a rhythm for your day. When you have multiple kids, everybody needs to know what is expected of them, what they need to do, and when it's going to happen. So having a rhythm for your day really allows everyone to stay on track, and it minimizes chaos. So this really is just an order of events for your day. It's saying, hey, we're going to do this first, and then we're going to move on to this next. So maybe we're going to get up in the morning, we're going to eat breakfast, we're going to do our chores, then we're all going to come together and tackle history. Then maybe some children are going to work independently while you work on spelling with one child. Then you break for snack and you move on to the next thing. Planning a routine for your days is going to help you from having multiple kids all at once coming to you asking, Mom, what should I do now? Mom, what's next? Mom, when are you going to help me with spelling? And you're just like, I can't answer all these questions at once. I can't help everyone at once. This homeschooling thing is not going to work. Have you felt like that? I felt like that. But a routine is a good way to avoid that. Having a routine for your homeschool days will help eliminate or at least reduce the chaos, okay? Might not eliminate it, at least reduce it. Okay, now you've established your priorities and you have a plan for your homeschool, so the next sanity saving tip is to create organizational systems. The key here is to have things organized enough that you and your kids can find things quickly and easily. This doesn't mean that you have to have a Pinterest perfect homeschool area though. Actually, I have some friends that if they created a Pinterest perfect schoolroom, that would overwhelm them, right? The organization and trying to think about where each thing, needs to go. Does this pencil go in the colored pencil little jar? Does it go in this jar over here? That would overwhelm them and they would hate it. So it really comes down to what works for your family. Be as organized as you and your children need so that you can find things easily. So yes, for some of you, it's going to mean that you're going to have these beautiful bookshelves and everything's going to be color coordinated and labeled. But for some of you, that might mean going to a garage sale, grabbing 2 free plastic tubs that you find and throwing all the books, all those homeschool books into one tub, and all your homeschool supplies get thrown into the other tub. Your kids and you know where to find what they need. If your kids need a book, they look in the plastic tub that has the school books. If they need some kind of homeschool supply, they look in the homeschool supply tub. Your family's organized enough for your family. Your kids and you can find exactly what you need in a short amount of time. And that's all the organization that your family needs. So again, do what works best for your family. You also want to have some systems for lesson planning, record keeping, and storing homeschool records. But because homeschool organization is a little hard to talk about in a podcast, because you really need to see it with your eyes, right? And see how everything is organized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to link to some videos that I have on YouTube with tips for keeping records and organizing your home and all of that. I will link those in the show notes. Now, systems are really important when you're trying to homeschool multiple grades. I remember when I first started homeschooling, I just had one child to homeschool, but I still remember realizing that I hadn't really thought through some important organizational questions like, what was my daughter going to do when she finished an assignment and I needed to grade it? Like, where was she going to put it? She's handing me these assignments, right? And I'm leaving them on the kitchen counter where I was cooking when she gave it to me, or I'm leaving it on the end table where I was nursing a baby. And then I just felt like there were papers everywhere. And then when you start adding multiple kids to the mix, it can get disorderly fast. So my kids would ask me, Mom, did you grade my assignment yet? And I'm thinking to myself, where did I even put that piece of paper to grade, right? So organizational systems, having them in place is really crucial to minimizing the disorder and saving your sanity as a homeschool mom of many kids. I found that having a basket or a hanging file organizer near our homeschool area where my kids could just put their finished work was a great option for us. I also let my older kids check their own daily assignments for errors, which allows them to see and correct their mistakes right away. I still grade my older kids' quizzes and tests, but letting them grade their own assignments is just taken some of the load off of me, and then it allows them to be able to see what they needed to fix right away instead of waiting for me, which, sometimes that might be hours, days, or even weeks till we get around to grading assignments. So that might be an option to let your older kids check their own daily assignments. Really just do as much or as little organization as needed to minimize the chaos in your home and to make it easier for you to homeschool multiple grades. So let's go back and review again before we move on to the last two sanity saving tips. We've talked about establishing your priorities, having a plan, and creating organizational systems. The fourth tip is to teach your kids to be self-learners. A self-learner can find the answer to the question themselves. So if you have multiple kids that you're homeschooling, I'm sure you've gotten this a lot where you think that your child can work independently, but they keep coming up and asking you a ton of questions like, what should I do next, Mom? What is today's date, Mom? Where should I put this paper, Mom? Where's my binder, Mom? Where are my books, Mom? So teach your kids to find the answers themselves. Instead of giving them an answer, use questions to help guide them to find the answer. Now, yes, I know this is going to take some time up front. You might not get to a lot of schoolwork those first couple of days or weeks because you're training them to do this. But trust me, it's going to pay off in the long run. For example, if your child wants to know how to spell December, and every single morning they're asking you how to spell December, instead of giving them the proper spelling every single day, ask them a question. Ask, where do you think you could find the answer to that question? Now, I know the typical reply is probably going to be, Mom, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. Have you heard something like that before? But instead of giving them the answer, help guide them to finding it themselves. So you could reply, well, you know what? I'm going to help you this time. The calendar over there on the wall has the spelling for all 12 months of the year. That's a good place for you to go every single day when you don't know how to spell one of the months of the year. You can go there and look at that instead of coming and asking me. What about if your child finishes an assignment and they come to you and say, Mom, what should I do next? Well, it's easy just to tell them to do math next or move on to whatever subject that you want them to do. But do you really want all of your kids to be asking you that question day after day after day for the entire school year? Probably not. So maybe you could say to them instead, well, what do you still have left to do? Which one of those things that you have left could you work on by yourself because I'm working on math over here with your sibling? Or maybe you could say, well, which one do you need my help on because Right now, I'm able to help you. So eventually they're going to learn to look a little bit harder for the answers to their questions instead of coming to you immediately, because they're going to realize if they come to you for an answer to a question, it's going to take more time and be more work because you're going to be asking them a whole bunch of questions to try to guide them to finding the answer themselves. And they're going to go, this is so much easier just to figure it out myself instead of bothering mom. So ask them questions to help guide them to finding their own answer. Another example is with math problems. I tell my kids, if you have a question about how to do a math problem, I want you to go back and review the lesson before you ask me. So when they come up and say, Mom, I can't find the answer, I ask, did you review the lesson again? Their reply is usually, Mom, that takes too much time. But I tell them, go back, review the lesson again, and then I'll help you if you're still struggling. So again, teaching your kids to be self-learners will minimize the demands that are placed on you as you homeschool multiple grades. And that's what we want to do. We want to minimize all of these demands on us as moms that really just bring so much chaos to our minds and to our homes. Finally, my last sanity-saving tip for homeschooling multiple grades is integrate learning into your daily life. We do not live our lives in little boxes. We don't have a spiritual life that we do for 1 hour a day or just on Sundays. And we don't just learn for a few hours a day and then move on to other activities. Homeschooling is a lifestyle where learning is integrated into our daily lives. So incorporate learning into your life instead of trying to squeeze school time into your already busy schedule. So think about how you can incorporate the academic work into your life to make the most of your time. Can you do some school in the car or at lunch? One of the things that I have done in the past is listen to audiobooks with my kids when we're driving in the car. And actually, driving in the car is a great time to do a lot of different homeschool activities, like analyzing a book that you've been reading, or practicing math facts out loud, or discussing the history lesson or current events. Actually, another thing that we like to do is discuss current events around the dinner table. What my husband's there and he has a lot of input to offer. And so that's a great time to discuss current events or to talk about what your kids have been learning as well. So look for learning opportunities throughout your day. I think sometimes we get so hung up on academics and the book work that we forget that our kids can learn so much from everyday life experiences. So if you're going to cook a meal for a family that just had a baby, that is a life skill that you can count for school. But I do want to give a little friendly warning, and this is something that I am speaking to myself here, because in an effort to integrate learning into life and to make learning a lifestyle, I often burden myself by trying to make every single thing a learning opportunity. So when I was baking or cooking with my kids, I'm thinking, how can I make this into a math lesson and a history lesson? Oh, okay, the measurement's going to be math, and we're cooking Chinese food so we can talk about Chinese culture. And I'm just going to tell you, cooking and baking with my kids was no longer fun. And that is not what we want to do. We don't want to burn ourselves out or stop enjoying time with our kids because we're trying to do all this brain gymnastics to figure out how we can make every life experience a learning opportunity. So you really truly can have fun as a family just for the sake of having fun. You can enjoy doing things with your kids just for the sake of enjoying your kids. You don't have to make it into a learning opportunity, but here's the amazing thing. Your kids are going to be learning anyways. Even if you don't put in all that effort, your kids are still learning by making a meal for someone else. They're still learning when they're baking with you, even if you don't plan out all these detailed math and history lessons that coordinate with it. So I just encourage you to have fun as a family for the sake of having fun, but know that every opportunity that your kids have could be a learning opportunity. And often they're learning without us even putting any additional effort into it. So the 5 sanity-saving tips for homeschooling multiple grades without losing your mind are: number 1, establish your priorities. Number 2, have a plan. Number 3, create organizational systems. Number 4, teach your kids to be self-learners. And number 5, integrate learning into your daily life. I hope these sanity saving tips were helpful for you. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the second part in this series as we look at some very practical ways to homeschool multiple grades. And remember that the show notes for this episode can be found at janelleknutson.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this podcast, would you consider leaving a review and sharing it on social media? Thank you so much for listening.